Ladies and gentlemen, today we embark on a journey through time to explore the fascinating history of one of the world's most beloved beverages, coffee. From its legendary discovery in Ethiopia to its global influence, coffee has shaped cultures, economies, and daily routines for centuries. The history of coffee begins in the highlands of Ethiopia, where legend credits its discovery to a goat herder named Kaldi. According to the story, Kaldi noticed that his goats became unusually energetic and playful after eating the bright red cherries from a certain tree. Intrigued by their behavior, he decided to try the berries himself. To his amazement, he experienced a newfound sense of alertness and vitality. Excited by his discovery, Kaldi took the berries to a nearby monastery, hoping that the monks would recognize their significance. However, the monks were skeptical and even feared that the berries might be the work of the devil. One monk, in particular, threw the berries into the fire, but as they roasted, a rich and inviting aroma filled the air. This accidental roasting led to the realization that the beans inside the cherries could be brewed into a drink. The monks soon began using the roasted beans to prepare a dark, aromatic beverage that helped them stay awake during long hours of prayer and meditation. Word of this miraculous drink spread quickly, and it became an integral part of religious life in Ethiopia. Over time, knowledge of the energizing effects of coffee moved beyond the monastery walls, reaching traders and travelers who carried it to new lands. While the legend of Kaldi may be more folklore than fact, historical evidence suggests that coffee was indeed first consumed in Ethiopia. Indigenous Ethiopian tribes are believed to have ground coffee beans and mix them with animal fat to create an energy-rich food. Others brewed the beans into a tea-like infusion. The coffee plant itself, Coffea arabica, is native to Ethiopia, and even today, the country remains one of the world's top coffee producers. Ethiopia's relationship with coffee is deeply rooted in its culture, and the traditional Ethiopian coffee ceremony remains an important social and spiritual ritual. This ceremony, which involves roasting, grinding, and brewing coffee in a special pot called a jabina, is a symbol of hospitality, respect, and community. Guests are often invited to share 3 rounds of coffee, each with its own significance. From its humble beginnings in Ethiopia, coffee embarked on a journey that would change the world. The next chapter in its history unfolded as it made its way across the Red Sea to the Arabian Peninsula, where it would become an essential part of daily life. But before we explore its spread, we must recognize Ethiopia as the true birthplace of coffee, a land where this beloved beverage was first discovered, cultivated, and cherished. After its discovery in Ethiopia, coffee's journey truly began when it found a place in religious practices. Ethiopian Orthodox Christian monks were among the first to recognize the stimulating effects of coffee, integrating it into their spiritual routines. These monks, who often engaged in long hours of prayer, meditation, and scripture reading, needed a way to stay awake and focused, especially during nighttime vigils. According to historical accounts, monks experimented with coffee by brewing it into a tea-like drink or chewing the beans directly. They soon realized that the beverage provided a noticeable boost in energy and alertness, allowing them to maintain their spiritual discipline without succumbing to fatigue. Over time, coffee became an essential part of monastic life, considered a divine gift that helped monks strengthen their devotion. Beyond its practical use for staying awake, coffee also gained symbolic and cultural significance among religious communities. It was seen as a substance that enhanced spiritual endurance, enabling monks to push past physical exhaustion and reach deeper states of contemplation. Some even believed that the drink brought them closer to God by allowing them to maintain clarity of thought during their prayers. As the knowledge of coffee's effects spread, Ethiopian monks shared it with their counterparts in Yemen, where Sufi mystics quickly embraced it for similar reasons. The Sufis, who practiced a form of Islamic mysticism, engaged in long, rhythmic chanting and meditation sessions known as dhikr, during which they sought spiritual enlightenment. Coffee proved invaluable in helping them stay alert and sustain their focus during these prolonged religious rituals. To prepare coffee, the Sufi monks developed a more refined brewing method. They roasted the beans over an open flame, ground them into a fine powder, and then boiled them in water to create a strong, aromatic drink. This process laid the foundation for modern coffee brewing techniques. As coffee became an integral part of their spiritual gatherings, it also facilitated a sense of unity among followers, as drinking coffee together became a communal practice. The growing reliance on coffee among monks and religious scholars led to the establishment of early coffeehouses in Yemen, known as Café, where people gathered not only to drink coffee, but also to discuss religious matters, philosophy, and poetry. These coffeehouses quickly became centers of intellectual and spiritual discourse, strengthening coffee's role as more than just a beverage. It became a medium for enlightenment and social connection. Thus, what started as a simple discovery among Ethiopian monks evolved into a tradition that shaped religious and intellectual life across regions. This early use of coffee set the stage for its rapid expansion beyond the confines of monastic and Sufi circles, reaching the broader population and eventually crossing continents. By the 15th century, coffee had made its way across the Red Sea from Ethiopia to the Arabian Peninsula, where it took root in Yemen. It was here that coffee cultivation truly began, transforming the drink from a local Ethiopian discovery into a global phenomenon. The Yemeni people recognized the value of the coffee plant and began growing it systematically, particularly in the region surrounding the port city of Mocha, a name that would later become synonymous with coffee itself. Yemen's Sufi monks, who had learned about coffee from Ethiopian religious scholars, played a key role in spreading its popularity. They used coffee as an aid for their nightly meditation and prayer sessions, finding that the drink helped them stay awake and focus during their long hours of devotion. Over time, they refined the brewing process, roasting and grinding the beans to produce a strong, dark beverage that would become the foundation of modern coffee drinking. As coffee's reputation grew, it began to spread beyond the religious communities of Yemen. The drink quickly became popular among merchants, scholars, and common people. By the early 16th century, coffee was widely consumed in the Islamic world, reaching major cities like Mecca, Medina, Cairo, and Baghdad. It was during this period that the first coffee houses, known as Café, were established. These coffee houses became vibrant social hubs where people gathered to drink coffee, discuss politics, exchange ideas, and enjoy music and storytelling. The rise of coffee houses marked a significant cultural shift in Arab society. Unlike taverns that served alcohol, which was forbidden in Islam, coffee houses provided a socially acceptable space for intellectual and social engagement. Poets, scholars, merchants, and travelers frequented these establishments, engaging in lively debates and spreading news from distant lands. In many ways, these early coffee houses functioned as centers of learning and political discussion, much like modern cafes do today. However, coffee's growing popularity also attracted controversy. Some religious authorities viewed coffee with suspicion, fearing that its stimulating effects could lead to unrest and moral corruption. In the early 16th century, coffee faced bans in Mecca and Cairo, with religious leaders arguing that it altered the mind in ways similar to alcohol. However, these bans were short-lived. After a careful review, Ottoman and Islamic scholars ultimately declared coffee permissible, allowing its consumption to flourish once again. The strategic location of Yemen and the bustling trade routes of the Arabian Peninsula helped coffee spread further across the Islamic world. Yemeni traders controlled the coffee trade, exporting beans to the Ottoman Empire, Persia, and North Africa. The port of Mocha became the primary gateway through which coffee reached the broader Middle East and beyond. Yemeni merchants guarded their coffee plants carefully, ensuring that beans were exported in a way that prevented others from cultivating them elsewhere. Despite these efforts, the spread of coffee cultivation outside Arabia was inevitable. By the late 16th century, coffee had reached the Ottoman Empire, where it would take on an even greater role in shaping the political, social, and cultural life of the region. From there, it was only a matter of time before coffee made its way to Europe and the rest of the world. As coffee spread through the Arab world in the 16th century, it gave rise to one of the most influential institutions in history, the coffeehouse. Known as Café, these establishments were more than just places to drink coffee. They became vibrant centers of social, political, and intellectual life. The emergence of coffee houses marked a shift in how people gathered, exchanged ideas, and engaged with the world around them. The first coffee houses appeared in the bustling cities of the Ottoman Empire, such as Istanbul, Cairo, and Damascus. Unlike traditional meeting places such as mosques or private homes, coffee houses provided a unique setting where people from different walks of life could gather freely. Merchants, scholars, poets, musicians, and travelers would sit together, sipping coffee while engaging in animated discussions about politics, philosophy, literature, and current events. One of the reasons coffee houses gained such popularity was their accessibility. While other forms of entertainment, such as feasts or private gatherings, were often reserved for the wealthy elite, coffee houses were open to anyone who could afford a cup of coffee. This made them an inclusive space where commoners and aristocrats alike could interact, breaking down social barriers in a way that was unprecedented at the time. Inside these coffee houses, the atmosphere was lively and engaging. Many featured live music, poetry readings, and storytelling sessions, where traditional folk tales and epic sagas were recited to captivated audiences. Chess and backgammon were also popular pastimes, adding to the interactive and dynamic nature of these spaces. Over time, some coffee houses even became known for hosting political debates, where citizens would discuss government policies and critique rulers, sometimes to the dismay of the authorities. Because of their role in fostering public discourse, coffee houses often attracted the attention of political leaders. Ottoman rulers and religious authorities grew wary of these establishments, fearing that they could become breeding grounds for dissent and rebellion. Several attempts were made to ban coffee houses, with some rulers ordering their closure or punishing those who frequented them. However, these bans were largely unsuccessful, as the public demand for coffee houses was too strong to suppress. The impact of coffee houses extended far beyond the Arab world. As coffee spread to Europe, so too did the concept of the coffee house, leading to the creation of similar establishments in cities like Venice, London, and Paris. In these European coffee houses, often referred to as penny universities, patrons could engage in intellectual discussions and gain knowledge for the price of a cup of coffee. Writers, philosophers, and businessmen gathered in these spaces, fueling the rise of the Enlightenment and the growth of modern capitalism. By the 17th century, coffee houses had become an integral part of urban culture in both the Islamic and European worlds. Their influence was undeniable. They shaped the way people socialized, encouraged the spread of new ideas, and even played a role in major historical movements. The coffee house was no longer just a place to drink coffee. It was a hub of creativity, commerce, and revolution, setting the stage for the global coffee culture we know today. By the early 17th century, coffee had begun making its way into Europe, forever changing the continent's social and cultural fabric. The introduction of coffee to Europe was driven by trade and exploration, as merchants and travelers returning from the Ottoman Empire and the Middle East brought tales of this mysterious and invigorating drink. Though initially met with skepticism, coffee soon became one of the most popular beverages across the continent, sparking the rise of coffee houses and fueling the intellectual and economic revolutions of the time. The earliest records of coffee's arrival in Europe trace back to Venetian traders in the late 16th century. Venice, a powerful hub of trade between Europe and the East, was one of the first cities to gain access to coffee beans through its extensive commerce with the Ottoman Empire. Wealthy Venetian merchants and aristocrats were among the first Europeans to experience coffee, as it was initially sold in apothecaries as an exotic medicinal drink. At first, it was promoted for its supposed health benefits, believed to aid digestion, cure various ailments, and boost energy. As the demand for coffee grew, dedicated coffee vendors emerged, and in 1645, Venice became home to the first European coffee house. The concept quickly gained traction, and coffee houses began appearing in other major European cities such as London, Paris, Vienna, and Amsterdam. These establishments became meeting places where scholars, artists, merchants, and politicians gathered to exchange ideas, conduct business, and discuss current events. However, coffee's growing popularity did not come without controversy. In the early days of its introduction, coffee faced strong opposition from religious authorities and conservative groups. Some priests and clergymen viewed coffee as a bitter invention of Satan due to its association with the Islamic world. In fact, when coffee first reached Rome, Catholic leaders debated whether it should be banned altogether. The turning point came in 1600 when Pope Clement VIII was asked to condemn coffee. Instead of banning it outright, the Pope decided to taste the drink himself. Finding it delightful, he declared that coffee should not only be accepted but even blessed, effectively eliminating religious opposition and allowing its spread throughout Europe. As coffeehouses flourished across the continent, they became known as centers of learning and intellectual debate. In England, they were often called penny universities because, for the price of a single penny, customers could purchase a cup of coffee and engage in stimulating discussions with some of the greatest minds of the time. Scientists, philosophers, and businessmen flocked to coffeehouses, where they debated new ideas, read newspapers, and formed influential societies. Notably, institutions like the London Stock Exchange and Lloyd's of London trace their origins back to early coffeehouse meetings. The impact of coffee was particularly significant during the Age of Enlightenment in the 17th and 18th centuries. As the drink gained popularity, it gradually replaced alcohol as a preferred beverage for intellectuals and professionals. Unlike beer and wine, which were commonly consumed throughout the day, coffee sharpened the mind and promoted wakefulness, making it an ideal companion for writers, scholars, and politicians. Some historians even argue that coffee helped fuel the Enlightenment by providing the energy and focus needed for revolutionary ideas to emerge. By the late 17th century, coffee had spread to France, where it became a staple among the aristocracy. The city of Paris saw the rise of elegant coffeehouses, which attracted poets, writers, and revolutionaries. Meanwhile, in Austria, the famous Viennese coffee culture began after the Ottoman retreat from Vienna in 1683. Legend has it that the fleeing Ottoman army left behind sacks of coffee beans, which the Viennese used to establish some of the most refined coffee traditions in Europe, including the addition of milk and sugar. While coffee was becoming a cultural phenomenon, European colonial powers were also eyeing its economic potential. The Dutch, French, and Portuguese sought to break the Arab monopoly on coffee cultivation by smuggling coffee plants to their overseas colonies. This marked the beginning of coffee production outside the Middle East and would soon lead to the establishment of vast coffee plantations in the Caribbean, South America, and Southeast Asia. The spread of coffee was no longer just a cultural movement. It had become an economic force that would shape global trade for centuries to come. As coffee spread across different cultures, it did not always receive a warm welcome. Its dark color, strong aroma, and stimulating effects led to suspicion, particularly among religious leaders who debated whether it was a blessing or a dangerous indulgence. The drink, which had gained immense popularity in the Islamic world, faced scrutiny from both Muslim and Christian authorities at various points in history. The controversy surrounding coffee was not just about its effects on health and behavior, but also about its origins, associations, and the potential social changes it could bring. One of the earliest recorded instances of religious opposition to coffee occurred in the Ottoman Empire during the 16th century. Although coffee had already become a staple in Arab society, its growing influence led some conservative Islamic scholars to question whether it was permissible under Islamic law. Some clerics argued that coffee's stimulating properties made it intoxicating and, therefore, haram, forbidden, likening it to alcohol, which is strictly prohibited in Islam. Others feared that coffeehouses were becoming places of gossip, political discussion, and even rebellion against the ruling authorities. In 1511, the governor of Mecca, Khair Beg, took drastic action against coffee. He gathered Islamic scholars and medical experts to discuss whether the drink should be outlawed. The governor, believing that coffee encouraged idleness and led to disruptive behavior, ultimately declared it forbidden and ordered the closure of coffeehouses. However, this ban did not last long. When news of the prohibition reached the Ottoman Sultan Selim I, he overturned the ruling, recognizing the economic and cultural importance of coffee. As a result, coffee drinking resumed, and its popularity continued to grow throughout the empire. The controversy did not end there. In the 17th century, Sultan Murad IV of the Ottoman Empire, known for his harsh and authoritarian rule, took an even stricter stance against coffee. Concerned about the potential for dissent and rebellion, he imposed a ban on coffee, tobacco, and alcohol, enforcing severe punishments on those who were caught consuming these substances. Secret police patrolled the streets, and violators risked public beatings, or even execution. Despite these harsh measures, the people of Istanbul continued to drink coffee in secret, demonstrating their deep attachment to the beverage. While coffee was facing challenges in the Islamic world, its introduction to Europe in the 16th and 17th centuries also sparked religious debates. European clergy were suspicious of coffee, partly because of its association with the Muslim world. Some Catholic priests referred to it as the bitter invention of Satan, warning that it might corrupt Christians who drank it. The idea that coffee was an Islamic drink led to concerns that it could pose a spiritual threat to the Christian faith. The controversy reached its peak when coffee was introduced to Rome. In the early 1600s, local priests urged Pope Clement VIII to ban coffee, arguing that it was a dangerous foreign influence that should be condemned. However, the Pope took a different approach. Before making his decision, he insisted on tasting the drink himself. After taking a sip, he was reportedly delighted by its rich and bold flavor. According to legend, he declared, "This Satan's drink is so delicious that it would be a pity to let the infidels have exclusive use of it." Instead of banning coffee, he gave it his official blessing, paving the way for its widespread acceptance in Christian Europe. With the Pope's approval, coffeehouses began flourishing across Italy and beyond. However, some Protestant groups remained wary of the drink. In the 18th century, coffee was criticized by certain Christian reformers who believed it encouraged vice and laziness. In Sweden, King Gustav III conducted an unusual experiment to determine whether coffee was harmful. He ordered that 2 prisoners be given coffee daily for the rest of their lives, while another group was given tea. Ironically, the coffee drinkers outlived their overseers, further proving that coffee was not as dangerous as some had feared. Despite these early challenges, coffee ultimately overcame religious opposition and became an integral part of daily life in both the Islamic and Christian worlds. What was once considered a controversial and suspicious drink gradually gained acceptance, transforming into a symbol of culture, intellect, and social interaction. Over time, coffee became a unifying force rather than a divisive one, bringing together people from different backgrounds, beliefs, and traditions. By the late 17th and early 18th centuries, European colonial powers recognized the immense economic potential of coffee. While the Arab world had long dominated coffee cultivation and trade, European merchants and governments sought to break this monopoly and establish their own sources of coffee production. This desire led to the global expansion of coffee cultivation, as European colonial empires transported coffee plants to their overseas territories in the Caribbean, South America, Africa, and Asia. This marked the beginning of a new era, one in which coffee would become a key driver of global trade, wealth, and exploitation. The Dutch were among the first Europeans to successfully cultivate coffee outside of Arabia. In the late 1600s, Dutch traders smuggled coffee plants from Yemen and began growing them in their colonies. One of their earliest successes was in Java, an island in present-day Indonesia. The warm, tropical climate proved ideal for coffee cultivation, and soon, Java became a major supplier of coffee to European markets. The term Java eventually became synonymous with coffee itself, a testament to the island's role in shaping global coffee production. Following the Dutch, the French also sought to establish coffee plantations in their colonies. In 1720, a French naval officer named Gabriel de Clou transported coffee plants to the island of Martinique in the Caribbean. Despite harsh weather conditions and threats from pirates during the journey, he managed to keep the plants alive. Upon arrival, the coffee plants flourished, and within a few decades, they spread throughout the French West Indies, laying the foundation for coffee production in the Americas. Meanwhile, the Portuguese introduced coffee to Brazil, which would go on to become the largest coffee producer in the world. In the early 18th century, coffee plants were smuggled into Brazil by Francisco de Melo Palhita, a Portuguese diplomat who was sent on a mission to French Guiana. Legend has it that he charmed the governor's wife, who secretly gave him coffee seeds hidden in a bouquet of flowers. With these seeds, Brazil's coffee industry was born. Over time, vast plantations, known as fazendas, were established, and coffee became one of the country's most important exports. As coffee plantations expanded across the Americas, Africa, and Asia, the demand for labor grew. Unfortunately, this demand was met through the widespread use of enslaved and indentured workers. On plantations in Brazil, the Caribbean, and other colonies, enslaved Africans were forced to cultivate and harvest coffee under brutal conditions. The profitability of coffee was closely tied to the exploitation of human labor, much like the sugar and cotton industries. Even after the abolition of slavery in the 19th century, coffee production continued to rely on exploitative labor systems, including low-wage workforces and harsh conditions for farmers. Despite these ethical concerns, the coffee industry continued to thrive. By the late 18th and early 19th centuries, coffee had become a global commodity, fueling the economies of colonial powers and shaping international trade networks. European coffeehouses, once limited to importing beans from the Ottoman Empire, were now supplied by vast plantations across the world. The shift from an Arab-dominated coffee trade to a European-controlled production system transformed coffee into one of the most valuable agricultural products in history. As coffee plantations spread, so did innovations in cultivation, processing, and trade. European merchants established powerful trading companies to control coffee exports, while technological advancements, such as steam-powered ships and railroads, made it easier to transport coffee to global markets. By the 19th century, coffee had cemented its status as an essential commodity, second only to oil in terms of economic importance. However, colonial expansion and European control over coffee production also had lasting consequences. Many of the regions that became major coffee producers, such as Brazil, Colombia, Vietnam, and Ethiopia, remained economically dependent on coffee exports for centuries. This reliance often led to economic instability, as fluctuations in global coffee prices could have devastating effects on farmers and local economies. In some cases, coffee-producing nations struggled with inequality and exploitation long after colonial rule ended. The colonial era of coffee production was a time of both remarkable growth and deep exploitation. It set the stage for coffee's modern global presence, turning it from a regional delicacy into an international necessity. The legacy of this period still influences the coffee industry today, shaping trade policies, labor rights, and the economies of coffee-producing countries around the world. The Industrial Revolution, which began in the late 18th century and continued into the 19th century, transformed nearly every aspect of society, including the coffee industry. As machinery, transportation, and production techniques advanced, coffee shifted from being a luxury enjoyed by the elite to a widely accessible beverage consumed by people from all walks of life. The rise of mass production, urbanization, and new brewing methods revolutionized the way coffee was grown, processed, and consumed, setting the foundation for the modern coffee culture we know today. One of the most significant impacts of the Industrial Revolution on coffee was the development of mechanized roasting and grinding. Before this era, coffee beans were typically roasted in small batches over open flames, requiring constant attention to prevent burning. Once roasted, they had to be ground by hand using a mortar and pestle, a time-consuming process that made coffee preparation labor-intensive. However, with the advent of industrial machinery, large-scale coffee roasting became possible. Factories were built with specialized roasting equipment that could process massive quantities of beans, ensuring a consistent flavor and making coffee more widely available. Grinding also became more efficient with the invention of mechanical coffee grinders. Instead of relying on manual labor, people could now purchase pre-ground coffee, making it easier and faster to brew a cup. This innovation was particularly important as coffee consumption spread among the growing working-class populations in industrial cities. Factory workers, who endured long hours in demanding jobs, found coffee to be an essential part of their daily routine, as its stimulating effects helped them stay awake and alert. Transportation advancements played a crucial role in coffee's expansion during the Industrial Revolution. The construction of railroads and the increased use of steamships dramatically improved the speed and efficiency of coffee transportation. Previously, coffee had to be shipped using slow-moving wooden vessels, which made long-distance trade costly and time-consuming. With the introduction of steam-powered ships, Coffee could be transported more quickly from plantations in South America, Africa, and Asia to major consumer markets in Europe and North America. This development not only increased supply but also lowered prices, making coffee more affordable for the average person. At the same time, innovations in packaging and preservation helped extend coffee's shelf life, allowing it to be stored and transported without losing its quality. The development of vacuum-sealed tins and airtight containers ensured that coffee remained fresh for longer periods, preventing spoilage and improving its overall accessibility. These advancements made it possible for coffee companies to distribute their products on a massive scale, giving rise to some of the first major coffee brands. As coffee became more affordable and widely available, coffeehouses also evolved. During the Industrial Revolution, urbanization led to a dramatic increase in the number of people living and working in cities. With this shift, coffeehouses became even more essential as social gathering places. They provided workers, intellectuals, and businessmen with spaces to meet, discuss ideas, and take breaks from their demanding schedules. Unlike earlier coffeehouses, which were primarily centers of political debate and artistic discussion, many 19th century establishments catered to the needs of the industrial workforce, offering quick and affordable coffee to fuel their daily labor. In addition to traditional coffeehouses, new methods of coffee consumption emerged during this time. Street vendors began selling coffee in large cities, offering quick and inexpensive servings to workers who needed a boost on their way to work. This was an early precursor to the modern coffee-to-go culture that would later become a defining feature of the global coffee industry. Perhaps one of the most influential developments in coffee history during the Industrial Revolution was the birth of instant coffee. In the late 19th century, inventors began experimenting with ways to create a soluble coffee product that could be prepared quickly and easily. While early versions of instant coffee were not as refined as the ones we have today, they represented a significant step toward making coffee more convenient and accessible. By the early 20th century, instant coffee would become a major commercial product, further expanding coffee's reach into households around the world. As industrialization continued, the role of coffee in global trade became even more pronounced. The economies of many coffee-producing countries became heavily reliant on coffee exports, leading to the establishment of vast plantations that operated under highly structured labor systems. The 20th century marked a turning point in coffee's history as technological advancements, globalization, and cultural shifts transformed it into one of the world's most consumed beverages. No longer just a regional commodity or a luxury for the elite, coffee became a daily necessity for millions of people worldwide. The century saw the rise of instant coffee, the birth of major coffee brands, the expansion of coffee culture, and the emergence of new brewing methods that shaped the way people drank and experienced coffee. One of the most significant developments in the early 20th century was the invention of instant coffee. Although earlier attempts had been made in the 19th century, it was in 1901 that Japanese-American chemist Satoru Kato developed the first stable process for producing soluble coffee. A few years later, in 1938, Nestlé introduced Nescafé, an instant coffee product that would revolutionize the industry. Designed as a convenient alternative to traditionally brewed coffee, instant coffee gained widespread popularity, particularly during World War II. Soldiers on the battlefield needed a quick and easy way to prepare coffee, and instant coffee provided the perfect solution. The U.S. military became one of the biggest consumers of instant coffee, and when soldiers returned home after the war, they brought their love for it with them, further boosting its popularity. Alongside the rise of instant coffee, the 20th century saw the emergence of large-scale coffee brands that dominated the global market. Companies such as Maxwell House, Folgers, and Nescafé became household names, using aggressive marketing campaigns to promote coffee as an essential part of daily life. Slogans like "Good to the last drop" and "The best part of waking up" became ingrained in popular culture, reinforcing coffee's place as a staple in homes and workplaces. The mass production and distribution of coffee made it more accessible than ever before, ensuring that people from all socioeconomic backgrounds could enjoy a cup of coffee each morning. The expansion of coffee culture also took a new turn in the mid-20th century, with the rise of espresso and café-style coffee drinking. In Italy, The invention of the espresso machine in the early 1900s changed the way coffee was prepared and consumed. Espresso, with its rich and concentrated flavor, became the foundation for many popular coffee drinks, including cappuccinos, lattes, and macchiatos. Italian-style cafes spread throughout Europe, offering a new kind of coffee experience that emphasized quality, craftsmanship, and social interaction. In the United States, coffee culture took a slightly different path. While diners and traditional coffee shops remained popular, the 1960s and 1970s saw the birth of a new wave of specialty coffee. The demand for high-quality, freshly roasted coffee grew, leading to the rise of independent coffee roasters and cafes that focused on artisanal brewing methods. This movement laid the groundwork for what would later become the specialty coffee revolution. Another major milestone in coffee's 20th century journey was the founding of Starbucks in 1971. What started as a small coffee bean retailer in Seattle quickly grew into an international coffeehouse chain that would redefine how people consumed coffee. Starbucks introduced the concept of the modern coffee shop as a third place, a space between home and work where people could relax, socialize, and enjoy premium coffee beverages. By the late 1990s, Starbucks had expanded worldwide, bringing espresso-based drinks and cafe culture to countries that had previously been unfamiliar with them. As coffee consumption soared, the environmental and ethical implications of coffee production also became a growing concern. The mass expansion of coffee plantations led to deforestation, soil depletion, and biodiversity loss in coffee-growing regions. Additionally, many coffee farmers struggled with low wages and poor working conditions due to the volatile nature of the global coffee market. In response, the late 20th century saw the rise of fair trade and organic coffee movements, which aimed to promote sustainable farming practices and ensure better wages for coffee growers. Certification programs such as Fair Trade and Rainforest Alliance emerged, giving consumers the option to support ethically sourced coffee. By the end of the 20th century, coffee had become more than just a drink. It was a cultural and economic powerhouse. It shaped morning routines, influenced global trade, and fostered communities around the world. Coffee's journey from a mysterious Middle Eastern beverage to a worldwide phenomenon had reached new heights, setting the stage for even greater innovations and cultural shifts in the 21st century. As the world entered the 21st century, coffee underwent another transformation. No longer just a morning necessity or a simple commodity, coffee became an art, a science, and a lifestyle. Consumers developed more refined tastes, seeking out higher quality beans, sustainable sourcing, and innovative brewing methods. At the same time, technology and globalization allowed coffee culture to spread in new and exciting ways. The 21st century marked the rise of specialty coffee, third-wave coffee movements, and the explosion of coffeehouse culture around the world. One of the most defining aspects of modern coffee culture is the specialty coffee movement. Unlike mass-produced coffee that dominated the 20th century, specialty coffee emphasizes quality, traceability, and craftsmanship. Coffee aficionados became more interested in where their beans came from, how they were grown, and how they were processed. This led to an increased demand for single-origin coffee, which highlights the unique flavors of beans from specific regions. Countries such as Ethiopia, Colombia, Guatemala, and Kenya became famous for producing high-quality beans with distinct taste profiles. The third-wave coffee movement, which emerged in the early 2000s, took this appreciation for quality to another level. Inspired by the artisanal approach of wine and craft beer industries, third-wave coffee focused on treating coffee as an artisanal product rather than a mass-market commodity. Baristas became highly skilled professionals, experimenting with different roasting techniques, brewing methods, and flavor extractions to create the perfect cup. Coffee shops specializing in third-wave coffee emphasized precision, transparency, and a deep respect for the craft of coffee making. Brewing technology also advanced significantly in the 21st century. While traditional methods like drip coffee and espresso remained popular, new brewing techniques gained traction among coffee enthusiasts. Pour-over methods, such as the Chemex and Hario V60, became popular for their ability to bring out the nuanced flavors of high-quality beans. The AeroPress, a device invented in 2005, provided a fast and versatile way to brew coffee, appealing to both home brewers and professionals. Meanwhile, cold brew coffee, which involves steeping coffee grounds in cold water for an extended period, became a trendy alternative to traditional iced coffee. Coffee culture also became increasingly digital, thanks to the rise of social media and e-commerce. Platforms like Instagram and YouTube played a major role in shaping trends, with coffee influencers and baristas sharing brewing techniques, latte art, and reviews of different coffee beans. Specialty coffee brands used online platforms to reach global audiences, selling high-end beans directly to consumers and educating them about the coffee-making process. Subscription-based coffee services gained popularity, allowing customers to receive curated selections of freshly roasted coffee delivered to their homes. At the same time, major coffee chains adapted to changing consumer preferences. Starbucks, which had already expanded globally in the late 20th century, continued to dominate the market but faced competition from independent coffee shops offering a more personalized experience. To keep up with trends, large coffee chains introduced specialty drinks, alternative milk options, and ethically sourced coffee beans. The rise of plant-based diets also influenced the industry, with almond, oat, and soy milk becoming common alternatives to dairy in lattes and cappuccinos. Sustainability and ethical sourcing became increasingly important issues in the coffee industry. As climate change threatened coffee-growing regions, farmers faced unpredictable weather patterns, reduced yields, and shifting growing conditions. In response, many coffee companies and organizations invested in sustainability initiatives promoting shade-grown coffee, biodiversity conservation, and fair wages for farmers. Direct trade, a model where roasters purchase coffee directly from farmers, gained popularity as a way to ensure that producers received fair compensation for their labor. Additionally, innovations in coffee farming and processing continued to evolve. Researchers developed climate-resistant coffee plant varieties to help farmers adapt to changing environmental conditions. Experimentation with fermentation and drying processes led to new flavor profiles, allowing coffee producers to differentiate their products in an increasingly competitive market. Some farms even embraced carbon-neutral practices, aiming to reduce the environmental impact of coffee production. Another major trend in 21st century coffee culture was the rise of ready-to-drink, RTD, coffee. Bottled cold brew, canned lattes, and coffee-infused energy drinks became widely available in supermarkets and convenience stores. Companies like Blue Bottle, La Colombe, and Stumptown Coffee Roasters expanded their presence in the RTD market, offering premium-quality coffee in grab-and-go formats. At the same time, traditional instant coffee underwent a revival, with brands introducing specialty-grade instant coffee that appealed to discerning consumers looking for convenience, without sacrificing flavor. The global reach of coffee culture also expanded as new coffee drinking traditions emerged in different parts of the world. In Asia, coffee consumption surged, with countries like China, South Korea, and Japan developing their own unique coffee cultures. Trendy cafes in Seoul and Tokyo became famous for their minimalist designs and intricate latte art. In China, where tea had historically been the dominant beverage, a growing middle class embraced coffee, leading to a boom in coffee shop openings and local specialty roasters. Meanwhile, Middle Eastern and African countries, which had long histories with coffee, saw renewed interest in traditional brewing methods such as Turkish coffee, Ethiopian coffee ceremonies, and Arabic kawa. As coffee culture continued to evolve, it became more than just a drink. It became a lifestyle. People connected over coffee in new ways, whether through coffee tasting events, barista competitions, or online coffee communities. The appreciation for coffee's complexity, history, and craftsmanship deepened, making it one of the most celebrated beverages in the world.